Hi everyone, this is Clint Lanier. I'm a professor at New Mexico State University, and we're going to talk today about writing resumes and cover letters. We're really going to go over resumes more than anything else. This presentation is intended for college students who are looking to write a resume while they're still in school. So we're going to go over some of the basic tips on creating resumes that will actually hopefully land you your job interview, okay? Now the first step is really to consider who your readers are. Who is it that's actually going to be reading this resume? Is it your future boss? Is it maybe your future colleagues? Is it some anonymous person in HR, or maybe your mom? Obviously it's not your mom. You can write that one off. That one's kind of silly, right? But your future boss, is it going to be the person that you're actually going to be working for directly? Or is it your future colleagues, people that you'll be working with generally in the department? Or somebody that you'll never meet in some random department, some anonymous person in HR? Well, what surprises most people about this is that it actually is some anonymous person in HR. In other words, it's not somebody that you are going to be working for at all. It's also not somebody you're going to be working with. It's just somebody who is assigned to sort through resumes and to let people make it through that first kind of gate, so to speak. And then this HR person will, once they get your resume, if it meets the certain amount of requirements that this job has, they will then pass it on to your future boss or whatever maybe hiring committee might be looking at it. And those people will have direct knowledge of what your job is. Okay? So think about this. Resumes are often sent through or placed into an employment database. The next time you go out and look at jobs, aside from going to a career fair or something like that, if you look at Indeed.com or Monster.com or any of the other search engines, job search engines, you'll notice that when you apply, you're essentially uploading a resume into a database. So you're not really giving it to a human being anymore. Again, outside of career fairs. However, even in career fairs, there are many places that come equipped with scanners, and so they'll scan your resume right there as you're talking to them when you hand it to them. So again, a person truly in your job market or in your occupation won't actually look at this thing. It'll be either a machine, either some type of database search function, or some HR person. The resumes in the database are then sifted and sorted, and they're either sifted and sorted by the HR personnel themselves or by a function in the database. The HR personnel do some type of first pass at the resume before sending them on. So your first reader is the person in HR, and your primary purpose for this resume, because all documents have to have a primary audience and a primary purpose. So your primary purpose for this resume, surprisingly enough, is not to get you a job. It's actually to make it past this person in HR. Make it past that first stage so that it gets passed on to the person that you eventually will work for. Now, the second step in creating a resume is to understand the reader's characteristics, just like this is the second step in really figuring out how to write anything. First of all, how much knowledge or technical knowledge does this reader have? In other words, how much do they know about what you're going to do? And the answer is little to none. Next, how much does this reader happen to know about the topic? For this particular reader, for the HR personnel, again, it's little to none. Say they're working in HR, and let's say you're trying to get a job as a chemist in a lab. They probably know very little about chemistry or about what chemists in labs actually do. All they really know is HR. Now, what role does this reader play kind of in the larger process? And when I talk about roles, we're talking about advisor, decision maker, or something else. And in this case, the HR personnel, the person that's actually going to look at your resume, plays the role of advisor. In other words, they're looking at your resume, and then they're going to pass it on to the decision makers who will actually decide to hire or not hire people. And those people trust this HR professional as some type of advisor. In other words, whatever resumes are handed on, they trust that they've been vetted by this HR personnel. So how will this person be reading? They'll be reading for very specific details within your resume. And what information does this reader need? The information that qualifies you as a potential candidate. Now, let's back up a minute. You might be asking yourself, if the reader has little technical knowledge, if they know little or nothing about the subject, then how is this particular person going to advise anyone about your particular qualifications? Well, this goes back to the third step. What is the information that your reader is looking for? The answer to that is your reader is drawing from the job posting to which you are answering. HR personnel draw from keywords used within job postings in order to analyze incoming resumes. That's really all they do. And the secret to creating a good resume is to understand that if your resume matches to a degree enough of the keywords used in that job posting, then you'll make it past that first kind of round of cuts that the HR personnel or even the database search is going to do. So then your job then is to make your resume as much as possible match the job posting. And this is the main reason why you can't have a single resume shotgunned out to about 10, 12, 20 different jobs. Every resume has to be set up for a very specific job for this specific reason. So let's say that, let me back up. Every resume, every job posting consists of two parts. There's the duties and the requirements. The duties are the things that you'll be doing in that particular job, and the requirements are the very basic requirements that you must have in order to carry out the particular job. The successful resume will use keywords found in each category in order to show that you have carried out similar duties previously, that you possess the skills required to carry out the duties here. And if you do those two things, if you show those two things, and if you use the keywords, again, you'll make it past that first round. Now, let me point out here that if you were to do both of those things, but you don't use the keywords that they include in the job description in either the duties or the requirements, you're not going to make it past that first round. You have to understand that those keywords are required for that person to match and to match your resume. Okay? So let's take an example here. Let's look at a particular job posting. This is a job posting for a design engineer. Okay? And this is a real job posting. It was a local job posting, but a fast-growing thin-gauge thermoform manufacturer has an immediate opening for a part and tooling design engineer. Qualified candidates must have SolidWorks experience. Mastercam and AutoCAD experience is a plus. This position will work directly with customers and tool room staff and must have good communication skills. Now, within this job posting, they have told you absolutely everything that you need to know in order to get this job. They've given you every keyword here. They've given you what your duties are, and they've given you the requirements to fulfill these duties. So all they want to see is, can you carry out these duties, and do you have the basic requirements that it takes in order to get this job? Let's do a keyword search. Let's look at some of the things that they mentioned. First of all, what is it you will be doing? This position will work directly with customers and tool room staff. So if you were to put on your resume that you have worked directly with customers and tool room staff, that obviously would be a bonus. Next, what kind of experience do you need to have? You have to have SolidWorks experience. Now, Mastercam and AutoCAD experience is a plus, and you must have good communication skills. So if your resume says that you have SolidWorks experience, you can demonstrate that you have good communication skills, and if you can say further that you have Mastercam and AutoCAD experience, then obviously you'll be ahead of the pack. Okay. What are some other keywords used? Thin gauge thermoform manufacturer. Well, thin gauge thermoform. If you can say that you have experience within this particular industry, thin gauge thermoform, if those three words are in your resume, they will be highlighted by either the database search or by the HR personnel that actually looks at this. Part and tooling design engineer. So that's actually the title, part and tooling design engineer. If you can mention those in yours. Again, design engineer. If you have design engineer on your resume, you'll be ahead of the pack. SolidWorks experience, as I mentioned, Mastercam experience, AutoCAD experience. And you'll work directly with customers and tool room staff. And finally, communication skills. So those are all of the various keywords used in this entire thing. Everything that's highlighted right here should be on your resume if you were to apply for this job. On your resume or your cover letter, but certainly within the either one or both. Probably in your resume. Okay. If you were to have this combination of keywords somewhere in your resume, either talking about past experience, talking about training in classes that you've taken, talking about proficiency in various software programs like SolidWorks, Mastercam, and AutoCAD, and so forth. Having these keywords on your resume is essential for getting this particular job. Now, the fourth step is matching the information that you've found with the information that's on your resume. So you must try in every possible way to use these keywords within your resume. Now, you don't want to lie, but you can use them as synonyms for what you've done. For example, let's say you know Pro-E, Pro Engineer, Professional Engineer, but you don't know SolidWorks. Now, since they're practically the exact same software, you could say you're proficient in Pro-E, which is similar in design and layout to SolidWorks. As somebody is skimming your resume, as that HR personnel is skimming your resume, or perhaps if it's a search database function, SolidWorks will pop up. Now, if they happen to read the rest of it, that's great, and they'll understand that, okay, you might not know SolidWorks, but you can get the hang of it very quickly because you happen to know Pro-E. Now, that's not lying, you're using a synonym. One mistake that a lot of people make is, let's say, for example, the job announcement calls for somebody to know Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, and maybe Microsoft Access or something like that. Now, if you know anything about Microsoft, that's essentially Microsoft Office. So a mistake that a lot of people make is on the resume they say proficient with Microsoft Office or no programs in Microsoft Office. But that's not what's on the job opening. They say specifically Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, and so forth. And people ask me, well, do I have to put each of those on? Yeah, that's the whole point. You have to put each of those on as keywords. Now, if you don't have them on, sure, we know that it might be the same thing, but unfortunately, somebody in HR is looking for those specific keywords, or a database function that searches through resumes scanned into its system is looking for those specific keywords. So even though Microsoft Word is the same thing, or I'm sorry, Microsoft Office is the same thing as understanding all of those others, it's not going to count as much, okay? Now, which type of resume is right for you? There's really two types of resumes. There's what's called a functional resume and an archival resume. A functional resume normally focuses on functions or particular skills you have achieved, while an archival resume focuses more sequentially on jobs that you've held in the past and then highlights what you've done in those jobs as a comparison to this job that you're going for. Here's an example of each of these. Now, the one on the left is an example of a functional resume, while the one on the right is an example of an archival resume. So you'll notice that the one on the left, it's based around specific things that you understand. So writing expertise, technical proficiency, and collaborative experience. This particular person is not talking specifically about jobs that they've held in which writing expertise or technical proficiency were important. Instead, they're talking about the functions that they understand. Now, the one on the right, however, is more of an archival. This is my education, followed by the training that they've had, followed by their employment history. And under each of those, they have the specific duties, titles, for example, of each of the, either the employment or the education that they've had. Okay. Now, typically, if I am going to advise students, I would ask that you do an archival resume versus a functional resume, and it's really just because you don't have a lot of training, you don't have a lot of job experience or history within the particular discipline. So you'll start with your name and contact information, prominent and at the top. I want you to think of three different sections here, and this is how we're going to categorize the sections of the resume. The first would be the education, the next would be employment, and the final would be more of a personal section. In education, I want you to think of four different things: general information, class information, specific class information, and then finally activities or accomplishments. In employment, I want you to think of three different things: general information, duties and responsibilities, and skills and proficiencies. And those will be the subsections within employment, and then in education, those will be the four subsections within education. Okay, so moving on to education. For your general information, this is what I'm talking about here. You'll list your type of degree, the name of the school, the year you're expected to graduate, and then followed by your GPA, if it's a good GPA. And here's an example. You're a candidate of a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, for example, at where? The University of Memphis, period. Expected graduation, is 12, 2007 in this case, and your expected GPA is 3.2. So a couple of things I want to point out here. First of all is candidate. You're not trying to go for a bachelor's of whatever it happens to be. You're a candidate for a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, okay? That's probably the best title that you can have right now. So don't think of yourself as a student. Think of yourself as a candidate for whatever degree you're trying to get. Now, your expected GPA. Students ask me, well, what if it's not very good? The GPA can be in the major or in general, and it's really up to the way you list it. Let's say, for example, you're going for a degree in chemical engineering. Chemical engineering is a very, very difficult degree. Let's say your current GPA generally is a 2.8, is 2.8 on a 4-point scale. Now that doesn't sound very good, but what if out of that 2.8, what if you have, say, a 3.8 on classes in your major? In all of your chemistry classes and engineering classes and math classes, you have maybe a 3.8. Maybe it was some history classes or English classes that brought you down. Well, I think it's justified if you say expected GPA in major would be a 3.8 in that case, or whatever it happens to be. They're going to see your transcript if they're taking you seriously as a candidate. They're going to look at your transcript and see that, okay, overall you might have had a 2.8 GPA, but it was because of History 101 in your freshman year, or it was because of Philosophy 210 in your sophomore year, or whatever it happens to be. But the classes that are important to them, the chemistry classes and the engineering classes and the math classes, as long as you're doing well in all of those classes, I think it means a lot to the employer. So be sure to put that down. Now, if you have kind of a lousy GPA in both, you can just leave that section off. Again, they're going to look at your transcript anyway. So if they're interested enough to look at your transcripts at that point, hopefully you'll get through the door to that second stage, and you can talk to them about maybe what you did wrong. Continuing in archive. So in your education section, moving on, also in your education section, the class information. A lot of students make the mistake of not including the classes they've taken. However, it's really important. Remember that you don't have a lot of experience in whatever it is you're trying to get a job in. Say it's physics. I mean, what experience do you have as a professional, somebody working in that field? You don't have any. So you're going to have to rely on the classes that you've taken instead as your job experience. So what classes have you taken that are relevant to this job? And what classes have you taken that are not relevant but also helpful? And this would be an example of setting it up. You could list relevant courses and then list the courses under that major that directly apply to the job. So thinking back to that design engineer job opening we looked at, you could list, say, fluid mechanics, engineering design process, and engineering in practice. And then you could have a second subheading called other courses. And you could list in there maybe engineering communications. You could list any foreign languages that you might have taken. You could list maybe management courses. Any other courses that, sure, they're not directly related to engineering, but they will help you in that particular job. Okay? Staying with education for a moment, you'll list specific class information. Pick 2 or 3 classes in which you completed very relevant assignments. In a degree like engineering, you'll usually have a senior project. And that senior project will usually have components that are based on what you're going to be doing in the real world. So that would be a class that you would list as a specific class. As an example, you could list fluid mechanics. And then for more detail, you would say something like participated in a collaborative project to create a high-pressure flow meter, or whatever it had to have been. Okay. Now, this is especially useful when you don't have a lot of employment history. So if you've never done an internship or a co-op directly related to the area that you're trying to go into, you need something to show that you have some type of basic training or you've carried out these types of same duties. And the best way to do that is to talk about the classes that you've taken that have had these types of projects in them. Finally, talk about your activities or accomplishments. List any activities, either relevant or interesting. If you have many activities or accomplishments, list them all out. If you only have a few, then highlight specific accomplishments. So you can put a subheading of, say, honors. List out honors or achievements, like honor societies that you've been involved in, if you've been on the dean's list, etc. Okay? Obviously, this is very important extracurricular information just to give you a more well-rounded picture of you while you're in school. Moving on to the next large section would be employment. Again, you're going to have 3 sections in everything that you list. The first will be general information. You'll list your title, the name of the organization that you worked for, the years that you worked there. Okay? So as an example, design engineer, General Motors, 2000, 2003, period. Notice I don't list where. If they ask, you can say Flint, Michigan, or wherever it happens to be. But on a job like this, remember this isn't a job application, this is a resume, a little bit different. Next, you'll list your duties and responsibilities. I want you to list 2 to 3 sentences giving some insight in what you did at this job. So an example of this one is researched and planned the drag coefficient for new and upcoming models. Next, created design specifications for whatever vehicles they might have done it. Notice a couple of things. First of all, you start with a verb and it's past tense. Researched, and then the next one says created. Rather than saying something like I researched or I created. You don't want to do that. You want to have an active verb starting each of these bullets. You also want to be consistent. Notice I have the exact same verb ending. Researched and created are both past tense active voice verbs. Okay? Moving on. You'll want to list any skills and proficiencies. Now this is after you've listed all of the jobs that you've had in the past that are directly relevant to the job you're trying to get. At the very bottom of the employment section, you'll list skills and proficiencies. Now list only provable skills. So things like equipment or tools that you can use. If you can use a backhoe, if you can use specific types of software or whatever. You can list languages that you speak. You speak Spanish, Italian, German, Japanese, whatever it has to be. And also software you know and so forth. So an example there is knowledge and proficiencies, SolidWorks, comma, Pro Engineer, comma, MS Office Suite, comma, SPSS, comma, and so forth. What you don't want to do here is list any unprovable skills. Unprovable skills are things that you can't show or demonstrate in a test. A lot of people like to put down here skills and proficiencies, and they'll say something like self-motivated. Well, how would you prove that you're self-motivated when you get to the office? Or they'll say good communication skills. How do you prove good communication skills? Those are not provable skills. Only list those things that you could take a test on, for example. Those other skills, those unprovable skills, you can show those or talk about those in your cover letter. The resume is not the point or the place to talk about those things, okay? General guidelines, again, just kind of reiterating some of the important points that I made. Always use active voice. Okay, as I mentioned before, always be consistent throughout. So make sure that your verb endings are all the same in your bullet points. You can mix different fonts and make the page look attractive. So you can say, for example, have a Arial sans serif font for the titles and use Times New Roman for the rest of it. You can use a table-like format with rows and columns, and you can use white space effectively to make sure that things are easily seen. And remember that resumes are essentially lists of information. But don't rely on, say, the Microsoft Office resume templates, which is another mistake that a lot of students make, because understand that oftentimes these resumes get turned into some type of scannable resume. So in other words, take a Microsoft Word document and change it to a .txt, a text file. All the formatting goes away. So what happens when you use all that fancy formatting in the templates that Microsoft Office would allow you to use? Well, suddenly the whole resume becomes completely unreadable. You need to keep it kind of simple. You can make it attractive but simple, because if it gets scanned into a database and somebody prints it out, they have to be able to find information still. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now let's do a bit of an example for you. This is the story of mechanical engineering student Bob Jones. Bob is your average run-of-the-mill mechanical engineering student. Bob is a junior, has completed 4 mechanical engineering classes and is currently enrolled in 6 other classes. So he is currently a junior. Bob has had one job as a cashier for a BP station this last summer, but has really had no other employment experience at all. Bob belongs to the student organization, ASME, but no other organization. So this is kind of an average student. I see students like this a lot. Not a lot of extracurricular activities. Not a lot of past jobs, not a lot. Obviously, if they're a junior, they really haven't had a chance to do internships or do anything like that. What jobs they've had are kind of unrelated, so it would seem, and not a lot of classes in the major. But maybe Bob's trying to get an internship, so they're creating this resume for that. This is the resume that Bob comes up with. He's trying to go for a pretty generic mechanical engineering internship with, say, General Motors or something like that. So this is the resume that he comes up with. Notice he has his contact information on the top, followed by employment. He has BP station, Memphis, Tennessee, in 2007. And he says, I was a cashier for 3 months. Okay, and that was it. That's all the detail he gives. Education, he says, mechanical engineering student, University of Memphis. Look at all the information that he leaves off there. And then it's followed by, say, 5 different classes. And then finally, awards, Dean's Honor Roll 2006, which is great. Look at all the mistakes that Bob makes here. Okay, what's wrong with it? First of all, there's little or no detail. If his job is completely unrelated to what he's trying to go for, why would he even put that first? Also, you don't even really know what his title is, or really what he did there, just that he was a cashier for 3 months. Next, when it comes to his education, what do those classes mean? The person that's looking at his resume won't know what MECH 347 or whatever it happens to be is. They won't know what any of those call numbers are. Only the people that go to that school will understand that. Now, what about those he's currently taking now? Aren't those somehow relevant? Also, when will he graduate? And what's his GPA? What activities is he involved in? There's also little or no relevance throughout the resume. How is that job relevant to the one he's trying to get? How about his classes? How are they relevant? There's also little to no formatting. So there's really no use of white space or indenting or different types or sizes of fonts or even the use of bullets. I mean, this is a scannable resume, but there's just nothing there. So let's change it around. Let's look at some of the things that he could have done. This is a revised version of Bob's resume. First thing that you can look at is that his contact information is centered. It's at the top, and the text size has been increased. The first thing that somebody will see is the contact information. So you need to make sure that it's prominent, it's large, it's easy for them to see and to understand. Next, the text size of the main categories has been increased to help the reader quickly find the information. So if they're looking for education, it's prominent, it's right at the top. If they're looking for employment, they can find it very quickly because the font has been increased. Next, he has better related his education goals, and he breaks out the information to make it easier to understand. So now, Bob is a candidate for Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering at the University of Memphis. Expected graduation date is listed, as is the current GPA. Throughout the resume, he's now using white space to separate categories. He's using a single space between related information and a double space between unrelated information. So you see between current GPA 3.2 and then the next relevant class, you see there's a double space there. And then there's double space between materials and engineering methods and analysis and so forth. So he's using double space between unrelated information, single space between related information. Classes are listed under a relevant heading, and only the titles of the classes are used. So you're no longer using class number, just the titles of classes. He set it up to say relevant classes, mechanical engineering, computer dynamics, mechanical engineering, methods of analysis, and so forth. Okay. Next, he lists 2 relevant classes. He singles them out, and the details are given as to what he did in those classes. So in the first one, he applied first and second ordinary differential equations, Laplace transforms, and Fourier series to problems in the areas of heat transfer, vibrations, and fluid mechanics. That would be directly related to the internship that he's trying to get, which is why he would have singled those 2 out. Next, engineering materials. Again, in this, he gives 2 bullet points. Now notice those 2 bullet points are consistent, studied, analyzed. They're also consistent with the one above, applied. Now, in the engineering materials, again, he talks about specifically what he did, and both of those things are directly related to what he would be doing at this particular internship. He also lists other classes, engineering communications, graphic designs. Now, these aren't directly related to what he's doing, but they could help him in that particular job, and that's what he wants the potential hiring person to know. Next, he lists his activities, the only activity that he's involved in, but he gives detail of one thing that he's done in that organization. So, active member of the University of Memphis student chapter of ASME. Okay, that's great, the only thing he's done. However, he talks about something he's done there, helped organize Engineers Week at the University of Memphis, which could be a big thing, but it shows that he's actually done something. He's participated within that single organization. Next, his employment. He lists his only job, similarly as his education goal, and gives his title. So he's a cashier, BP, Memphis, 2007. Now notice the order. The order is changed around. If he's trying to go for an internship, or if he's in college now, GM understands that he won't have a lot of employment history, that they will really rely on his education more than anything else. So he makes sure to change the order here. He lists 3 things that he did there, making it relevant and using those bullets. So he communicated directly with customers, he worked with a team of coworkers, and he ordered and maintained proper stock of merchandise. So he was a lot more than a cashier. He was the interface between BP and, in this case, the actual public, the customers. But he also worked collaboratively with a team of coworkers, and he had a little bit of authority. He had to order and maintain proper stock of merchandise. So it was a little bit more than cashier, and it's a little bit more impressive this way. Well, that's it. That's a lot of information I know about making resumes, but resumes are an extremely difficult genre to create correctly. But once you get it down, once you understand the points, first of all, that you're creating it for a very specific reader, once you understand the purpose, and then obviously how to set it up, resumes become a lot easier. Good luck to you. This has been Clint Lanier, professor at New Mexico State University.